A common objection in contemporary Western society is that Christianity is essentially divorced from life, neither practical nor particularly useful. It may be of some limited interest to those interested in spirituality, ancient beliefs, and mystical thought, but it's not about real life. The Bible is falsely yet consistently thought of as a compilation of unreliable history and a great deal of mythology. Many assume then that carefully looking at its message would be a waste of time. In my experience, many who strongly object to the Christian faith have never even read one of the Gospels in the New Testament. Life is busy. There's so much to occupy us and hold our attention. There's also much to entertain. Why should we consider this old message? The Old and New Testament of the Bible are so restrictive and old-fashioned, it is assumed. How can their message possibly be relevant to us in the Western world with all our sophistication and advancement? A large number of people agree that we should enjoy life while we can, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. I hope I die before I get old, was how one rocker of the 60s put it. Oblivion is coming when our misery and the ordeal of this life will end, so we ought to make the best of the time we have. We don't know what reality is, so live as you please, and don't be confined by religious claims. In the book, The Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe, Lily Tomlin writes, "I refuse to be intimidated by reality anymore. After all, what is reality anyway? Nothing but a collective hunch. My space chums think reality was once a primitive method of crowd control that got out of hand. In my view, it is absurdity dressed up in a three-piece business suit. I made some studies, and reality is the leading cause of stress among those in touch with it. I can take it in small doses, but as a lifestyle, I found it too confining." This rejection of divinely appointed structure and order sums up the cultural climate of our day. The Bible gives us a radically different perspective, one that has a peculiar ring of truth about it. It tells us this life is not all there is, and that our reality, rooted in time, is defined by eternity. Yes, it acknowledges and expounds the great tragedy of life like no other book, but it also tells us that death is not the end, but a transition into a new final destiny. This is not a comfortable thought for many. The eternal state is something they would rather not think about. Scripture exposes and analyzes life with unmatched clarity. The Bible alone allows us to understand further the human paradox. In it, we see our godlikeness, our resemblance to God. We bear his imprint in our own nature, and yet we are also aware of the corruption that is in the human heart caused by sin. These truths, when presented together, indicate both hope of recovery and foster appropriate humility. The Christian message, the good news, begins right here with total realism. It goes to the very root cause of misery and death, our own sinfulness. We need to let go then of our cleverness and vain self-effort and see that we cannot save ourselves, that we cannot be what we were created to be without the intervention of God. Only when we recognize this are we in a position to receive the divine solution to our malady, Jesus Christ. With the disposition of a child and with humble hearts and open minds, we need to come to Christ for forgiveness and healing. Apologist Blaise Pascal writes, "The Christian faith teaches men these two truths. There is a God whom men are capable of knowing, and they have a corrupt nature which makes them unworthy of him. It is as equally dangerous for man to know God without knowing his own sinfulness as it is for him to know about his sinfulness without knowing the Redeemer who can cure him. Knowing only one of these aspects leads either to the arrogance of the philosophers who have known God but not their own sinfulness, or to the despair of the atheists who knew their own wretched state without knowing their Redeemer." This is the reality of this message, that through the life and death and resurrection of Christ, we can come to God by faith. We can receive forgiveness and cleansing, and by God's indwelling Spirit, we receive the power for a changed life. A new synthesis begins where the paradox of human glory and rubbish is resolved as the fire of His glory in us burns up the refuse of sin. It is in part through the careful examination and living experience of the human condition, this paradox of glory and refuse, that God calls and pursues us. It may be that our internal conflict and alienation, even from ourselves, does us a great service, for in it we hear the voice of God calling us from the decomposition of sin and all its futility, the footsteps of God behind us, pursuing us and calling us back to Himself.
Thank you for listening to this message brought to you by the Ezra Institute for Contemporary Christianity. To learn more about the Ezra Institute's mission to advance the Lordship of Christ, please visit www.ezrainstitute.ca.